Alright, what is up YouTube? It's K-Rod here. I'm back with another good video for uh I guess for y'all fans. Yeah, let's get right to it, man, before I get back into what I'm gonna do. I'm going to talk about how to fix the sport of boxing. I think this is a very, very big issue that needs to be addressed, and I think that will definitely be um, put on notice with this video. The sport of boxing has had a very tough history, especially with hard political protectionism and racism that protects fighters from fighting the best competition. With a lot of political promotional politics that prevents big fights from happening. And like we can literally see that ever since the Jack Johnson days in America, but even ever since I would probably even say like what let the Greek and Roman days where fighters are basically used as like political puppets in a sense where nations kind of represent their fighters as like a means of showing who's more dominant than who. And obviously it doesn't make any sense because it's all used for you know for a dog and pony show to make people feel lesser of a human being. But boxing is probably one of mankind's best sports on earth. But this sport obviously has a lot of dirty tactics that a lot of fighters get into, on top of promoters and commissions, where, especially here in the West, when I say West, I mean the United States, Europe, and I probably say, you know, maybe South America and Central America, like Mexico, or maybe any, like Latino American nations. But most likely it's definitely the US and Western European nations that have the biggest issues in boxing. And I would probably put Mexico or even Canada in there to make it more, diverse. But when I talk about corruption in boxing, like we need to talk about everything. We need to talk about the corrupt judges, the corrupt commissions, the corrupt, um, you know, promoters, and corrupt fighters that come in with bad intentions where there's not enough regulation to prevent bad people from entering into the sport. Oh, also corrupt referees as well. But obviously, from where I look at it on an economic point of view, there is a lot of government interference in the sport of boxing, i.e., with licensing laws where fighters have their hands licensed where they cannot use it in a means of self defense, but except they get inside the boxing ring, which, it doesn't make any sense. But a fighter's life should always be protected. No matter what you do in life, you always need to protect yourself because no matter what the cost may be, if you're not able to use a weapon of any sort of, you know, of any situation that you may get into, your hands have to be the last resort you have to do. And even if you have to use any knives or any weapons of personal protection, that is a big issue when it comes with the state interfering with, you know, political security where people want to be safe with their families or friends. And a person who is a fighter or an active fighter that's not able to use their hands as a means to fight, that doesn't make any damn sense. That by itself is already an infringement onto someone's life right there. But in the sport of boxing, that definitely hurts a fighter because even if they are to get into a conflict with someone outside of boxing, who's to say that fighter cannot fight on their upcoming fight date, or they're suspended from the sport if not banned? Which, I mean, I don't see how that really like relates to boxing, but it's still a big issue because there's certain fighters that have a lot of emotions that go through their mind. So maybe if it's just that one night where that fighter's just really pissed off and they're trying to have a good time with their friends, and they somehow run into that one douchebag, pedestrian that wants to hurt them or do something crazy to them. Yeah, I do believe that a fighter, regardless of what their actions may be, should do what they want to do and face either the consequences or the end result of what would happen out of it. Not being that nobody should be prosecuted in the sense of, simply defending their own life, but let's just say if, a well known, fighter athlete does get caught for doing something insanely stupid by trying to beat someone up out of pure malicious intent. Yeah, of course, put that person into justice. But for every fighter, man, no. Like everybody has like a different mindset of what they get into every day, and that obviously infringes on a person's safety when they have to use their means of defense in whatever way possible to just like live the night or live the day or live to see another day. So that's number one in boxing, the political insecurity of protecting yourself outside the ring and inside the ring too, which I will probably get to that when it comes to fighters fighting each other. But I'm going to talk about other parts of the sport. We're going to talk about the bad commissions, like every single commission, the WBC, IBF, WBO, WBA, uh, like pretty much like the organizations that are the more corrupt versus from like less corrupted. But I'm not gonna go through every single one. I'm only gonna attack towards the more corrupt organizations that allow corruption to be made in the sport of boxing. But when we talk about these commissions like the WBA or the WBC, or even in certain cases like the IBF, there's a lot of talks where people talk about fighters having to make weight properly. And what really sucks with organizations like the IBF is that when fighters have that rehydration clause that's in effect, a certain like for example like Kell Brook that's on the screen, when he had his IBF belt, the IBF is very strict on having a rehydration clause the day before the weigh-in, and the day of the weigh-in, you can only reach like rehydrate up to I think like 10 pounds, so it can't go over the 10 pound weight limit, or else like you lose like your title. The day of yeah the day of the fight to not be able to keep it. So I like me personally, and I think a lot of people can like agree on this. Making weight is it's horrible. I used to wrestle back in high school, and I can attest that making weight for a certain weight that you're trying to compete in, especially in combat sports like either boxing, wrestling, or MMA, it's a piece like it's a piece of crap. It's horrible. Fighters do have to be disciplined to make sure that they're doing their job and doing their part to make sure weight is on time and weight is made. But let me tell you something. If you have to drain yourself out in order to make weight, then don't do it. But for any athlete that does make weight on time, then there really shouldn't be any restrictions on rehydrating to the point where you need to be limited, but you're also going to feel very stiff the day of like your match to make yourself less healthier, in your athletic contests that you're getting into, especially like boxing, because there's certain fighters out there that do need to rehydrate a lot, and yeah, they may look a lot bigger than the weight that the fight is made for. But let me tell you something: when guys like Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao, got into their toughest weight divisions, I'd say at like 147, um, their weight, yeah, their weight day of the fights, or in certain cases of big fights that they get into, the highest that like a fighter can ever go with like rehydration of weight would probably be at least 10 to 12 pounds. But for like Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao's case, if they're gonna make a fight for or make weight for a fight at 147, the most that that fighter will probably ever be would be at least 154 pounds or higher. But that doesn't mean that every fighter is like that. Every fighter can be a little bit different. Some fighters may gain 5 or 6 pounds for rehydration, or other fighters may lose weight. Which I think, in a sense, if fighters want to have the dehydration limit, then put that onto the contract. That's perfectly fine. But to make it somewhat a mandatory thing for certain title commissions that want to force it onto fighters that are fighting for a belt, no. That should be, voluntarily agreed through fighters to make sure that that can be, determined at a voluntary consensus to make sure both fighters are okay with doing dehydration or hydration for the fight. But most of the time fighters don't really care about that. They just want to go in and fight. But when it comes to title commissions having that, you know, I guess political power to determine what a fighter's weight needs to be for rehydrating for weight, that doesn't make any damn sense because the fighters are fighting for the title, and the title is obviously being sanctioned through the body that is offering that belt. But at the same time, you can't really stop anyone that wants to come out of their way to have their rules straight for the contract to be made fair for the fight. And I think for any title commission that is to come out with any rules of determining who's going to be champion for their business, that needs to be voluntarily agreed through the fighters that you are bringing in to the commission, or to the title commission board, right? To voluntarily set up these rules through the fights that are being sanctioned through the body to make sure that both fighters are on an equal playing field. Because, sorry, like when you look at other organizations like the WBC or the WBA, they have weird ass rules with making weight day before and making sure that your weight is right of day of the fight. And sorry, give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. But basically, to kind of finalize off of that point, when fighters do have issues with making weight of a certain fight, certain commissions are very strict of having to strip either the champion's opportunity of winning, the title belt, or certain challengers having to lose the opportunity of gaining a title belt. And the thing is that there needs to be some form of a voluntary consensus between both fighting camps to allow a little bit of leverage or a little bit of relaxation on making weight for the fight, so that way both fighters can at least be at a comfortable weight where even if it's just like a couple pounds over the agreed weight, that can be good enough for both fighters to still come in at a decent I guess like a decent maybe like overweight limit, right? Kind of similar to like what wrestling has, with their weight divisions. But for boxing, that's just way too strict. I can probably see at least a 5 pound weight limit or overweight limit, but if some fighter comes in at least like a pound or two over, that should not be a issue unless but the camp is not in agreement for that, and that can be like a penalty or some form of like maybe like a disqualification. But either or, it should just be like relaxed, because if fighters are still able to fight, then let them fight. If it's okay with both teams, then go for it. If not, then probably just penalize up the fighters' pay and have some form of a like minor punishment. I don't know, but for it to make people's opportunities wasted for them to train for a fight and have just like a little bit of trouble of making weight, that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, let's get right on to the next issue of fixing boxing. I would definitely say the investigation for checking fighters for drugs or any form of cheating needs to be highly, I say highly investigated before every single fight. Um, Fighters have had a huge history of cheating in the past, and that needs to go in the sport of boxing because there's too many lives that are lost in boxing where a fighter can possibly lose their life. And we've already had two fighters of 2019 that have passed away. Not sure of how many people died in 2020. I'm pretty sure some have died, but cheating definitely needs to be banned from boxing. That is a huge no-no, and if you love the sport of boxing, that does need to be clean. No other sport really has this to the extent where cheating goes super duper insane. But I mean, it still needs to be regulated in a market competition to make sure both teams or both sides or both opponents are at an equal playing field. So that way, fans can get the greatest, fair competition fought at the highest level. So my solution for this would be that there needs to be highly advanced drug screenings to make sure everything is tested for fighters. This is going for VEDA or any form of testing where no fighter is able to cheat. Like human growth hormones or any form of drugs that would give any enhancements to anyone's ability to do better, in fights, and definitely check for any possible tampering for gloves or fighters using some form of cream or some form of basically anything that could be used to tamper another fighter's ability to lose control in the fight to not be able to compete at a fair level, because I think that is what causes so many problems in boxing where fighters do get away with it, and until people find out about it, then what? That fighter is going to be going to be prosecuted with minor punishment? No. That fighter's life needs to be put away. If you kill a fighter in the ring and sometime throughout that time span investigation, the commission finds out that you actually cheated to kill this fighter. No, that needs to be put to a court of law to have that person executed or at least thrown in prison forever. But then on top of that, it's like if you take away someone's life illegally and there's very little investigation to it, then that's a huge threat to the sport, and that destroys the attraction to boxing, where people don't want to go back and see it because fighters are now coming with bad intentions just to murder another fucking fighter. Excuse my French, but if you care about the sport, you want to make sure everything is checked. Check the gloves, check the shoes, check the trunks, check everything of what a fighter has and make sure it is safe. Because sometimes some of these people that work in these crazy commissions don't know what they're doing. But obviously, the state likes to get involved by monopolizing athletic commissions to make it more difficult for fighters to be approved for their fight. And then there's not enough proper investigation for both teams to be properly signed off by the title commission or like whatever government run state athletic commission that destroys the opportunity for fighters to be licensed to go out and fight. And it's not helping. It's making it more difficult for people to go out and fight on a fair competitive level, and there's not enough responsibility to it because there's no accountability at all when it comes to, state athletic commissions trying to approve a fight properly, because one, it's a monopoly, and two, if title commissions and promoters are trying to set something up to feed a certain fighter to another fighter, like i.e. Tyson Fury cheating against Deontay Wilder, and there's no responsibility being made to check the what the possibility of Tyson Fury's team tampering with his gloves to make him look stronger against Deontay Wilder, to think that he won, blah blah blah, on top of checking, for drugs, checking for anything of that manner. Yeah, that really waves a huge red flag, making the sport very dangerous, and that's not bringing back fans. Like, you're going to bring back a angry mob, especially when you have people's lives on the line. And these fighters are trying to fight for their families, man. People don't understand. Like, people put their fucking lives into boxing, man. They fight to make a living, but to also fight for their family. But they're fighting for their life. People think boxing is okay. It's all funny. People don't have bad experience that much in boxing, but some people, that are doom and gloomers, just think like it's funny seeing a fighter get beat up to a bloody pulp, and think that, oh well, yeah, even though that this fighter got his ass whooped, that doesn't mean that he's gonna be all messed up when he wakes up tomorrow. No, like, some of these fighters have like traumatic endings, that don't end up well. Like Luis Resto beating the living crap out of Billy Collins, where he tampered his damn gloves, and then guess what? When I think the New York State Athletic Commission found out that he cheated in the fight, he got sentenced to, I think, 25 to life in prison, or 25 years in prison. But no, Billy Collins basically just committed suicide by driving his car into I think, like a tree or something. But yeah, that's messed up, and the reason why he did it, because his doctor told him that he could never see again, and he could never fight again in boxing. So he basically got himself screwed up, or he got screwed over by a cheating Puerto Rican piece of crap, Luis Resto, which I would never call him a Puerto Rican, because a real Puerto Rican boxer would never cheat, at a high profile level championship, match. But it's like, for any fighter to do that, they need to be shunned in this sport, because there is too much blood, sweat, and tears being lost in boxing, where fighters, are close to being killed for simply trying to compete, versus the other fighter that's coming in with bad intentions to murder you. You know? Like, I mean, it's really sad, because it really makes a sport look a lot more dangerous than it has to be, and as it shouldn't be, and fighters need to come out and speak that out. Don't you remember when, like, the NBA did the same exact thing, where, like, where players were coming in all drugged up, and then there was, like, times where, like, I think, like, other teams started tampering with other teams' drinks and, like, whatnot, and, like, certain players don't feel good, like, the day of, like, the basketball game, and, like, there's just a lot of, like, shadiness with referees trying to make all these crazy calls by giving one team a certain amount of fouls versus let the other team not getting a lot of fouls. So once that was talked about and brought up by, let's just say, David Stern, basketball got cleaned up real damn quick. Like, when all these basketball players were doing drugs and making it a lot more unattractive, where people found out that, like, let's just say guys like, I don't know, Michael Jordan, he was doing crack or cocaine. Yeah, people were like, dude, you got to stop doing that. You got to step it up. And, Michael Jordan, he obviously got shunned for that, and he knew best not to do that anymore. But that's how the sport got better, because people were exposing, or they got exposed, of the information, knowing that, the internet came out at that time. But when the information came out by other alternative medias or some form of media to release the information of what the NBA was doing, that's when what the fans demanded to say, hey, we're not going to go back to your NBA games until you fix this crap up. Because we want to see basketball. We want to see people going at it, having a good time, and seeing players face the best. You're not going to go to an NBA basketball game to see LeBron James, you know, basically souped up on steroids and being like a absolute monster on the court and just cheating every single game. No, you want to see LeBron James being LeBron James. I see Derrick Rose being Derrick Rose, but not once in my life I will ever see Derrick Rose high on some drug where he's just like an ultra monster. No, Derrick Rose, he plays fair and he competes just like everyone else. So if you care about a cleanliness of the sport you love, i.e. boxing, you should do the same thing. So I think for us boxing fans and the boxing community, including fighters that may watch this video, we need to speak up. If you care about any other sport in the world, you have to give that same attention for boxing. Boxing would easily be one of the best sports in the world, if not number one in the world, if all these things can be easily cleaned up with simple innovations. Having advanced drug screenings, having advanced title commissions where there is no corruption at all, making sure fighters are, making weight and there's, lenient, rules and policies that fighters can get through with making weight, making sure that the gloves are fit, making sure that there's no, crazy items that certain teams are using coming into the fight to tamper with, let the fighter's advantage to try to beat up another fighter, and making sure that title commissions are only having one belt for one face, one name. Also, let's talk about that. For title belts, I've kind of been saying this for quite a while, but why the hell are there so many damn title belts in boxing? This needs to go. Floyd Mayweather, he actually came out with a really, really good interview. If you guys just take a look at it, just type in Floyd Mayweather, too many title belts in boxing. He had a good interview with some like Spanish looking guy. But yeah, Floyd Mayweather, he pretty much said the same thing what I say on other channels like, Blue Blood Sports TV, Dante's Boxing Nation, Aki TV, plenty of other boxing channels. But yeah, there's too many damn belts in boxing. This needs to go. Look, if there's gonna be multiple title belts in boxing, have one belt. Have one belt for for every division, and then you have title eliminator fights made for those belts, and then, let's just say for 147, Errol Spence is undisputed at 147 for all the belts, and let's just say Terrence Crawford. Well, okay, I'll put Terrence Crawford in there. That'll be funny, but yeah, if Terrence Crawford beats the next top ranked guy for the interim, for the interim champion, undisputed, the interim undisputed champion contender to fight, to fight the champion for a championship bout. That should be made as a mandatory spot for the winner of that fight to fight the champion for that belt. So basically what I'm saying is you can have as many belts as you want in boxing, but I think it should be limited to at least, I don't know, because I was thinking 4 belts in boxing is okay, but to kind of give people enough opportunity to make sure that it's more interesting, because I'm going to get to my second point. Let's just say there's at least 6 titles in boxing. I wouldn't mind 6 titles. That would actually be pretty fun in my opinion. But you have 6 titles in boxing. There's only one champion for that title organization, and for every mandatory, that mandatory is fighting the champion, and the mandatory, if that person wins, takes the title, and then if the champion agrees to a rematch and still loses in that rematch, then that new champion can challenge other champions within different commissions or title organizations, right? And then obviously, the champ would still have to face their mandatories that are being ordered to fight them. But you kind of get what I'm saying. You could still have as many champions as you want in boxing, or as many world champions as you want in boxing, but have like one face, one name for the champion, and then the champion fights those other champions as their mandatory for the opposing world champions that they want to go after to unify the titles, and then you have an undisputed champion. And then basically it's kind of going back to the old school. You could have, like let's just say 10 world championships in boxing. I'm just making this up. And then after that one person unifies all the titles, that person has the undisputed belt that is now formed into it. And then once that person leaves, the division, all those belts get dispersed, and boom, it basically resets itself. But I think just to make it more competitive, maybe 4 to 6 world championship belts are good. But to avoid political corruption, I think it's better to spread it out to at least 6. That's what I would think, instead of just having like multiple belts for the like the major world champ, for the major 4 world title title commission organizations that exist today: the WBO, the WBA, the IBF, and I think the WBC. But yeah, if you just look at the WBC, but there's so many damn title belts for the WBC that it just makes it very unpopular, and now people are not liking the WBC because the WBC is coming out with all these with all these damn ridiculous titles, like the WBC franchise champion, the WBC Feaker box champion. Like, what the hell are these belts? These belts need to go. Just have one damn belt. And guess what? If that person does become champion in whatever division that they fight in, then that person challenges the other opposing world champion of a different title commission, and then boom, you can either vacate that belt or probably just unify that title with another title. I don't know, but that would be kind of good because with one belt for every face in a division, it makes it a lot cleaner and a lot more interesting to have like another Jamel or Jamal Charlo type fighter to move up in weight and then go after that other champion of the same title commission to say, hey, I want your IBF belt, and I just came up from 154 to come up to 160 to come F you up. And that makes it a lot more interesting because it makes it more interesting to have tougher competition fighting each other, and now it's lesser. There's lesser opposition that will avoid you, and basically it will make it a lot more interesting to keep the I guess like the higher volume of best or of better competition to still fight each other. So that's definitely going to make fights a lot more interesting, and fights to be made quicker and easier because fighters are no longer avoiding each other by having one face, one name for every title commission. But I think that's going to be interesting if that were to go back to its old roots. Where, I mean, originally boxing back in the old days, during Muhammad Ali days, there was only one championship for every division. So if you wanted to, move up in weight after you won your title of that division, you're basically the next mandatory for the champion of that division. So your mandatory was another champion coming up from another division, which, I mean, that's awesome because that's basically what I was trying to implement to say that if you have multiple belts in boxing, the champion for that given title commission belt, like the WBC, let's just say Jermell Charlo wins the belt at 154. If he wants to get another WBC belt at a different division, he needs to vacate the belt and then he challenges that fighter as a mandatory because he is now the champion, giving up his belt to fight another champion. So now he is automatically a mandatory for that other champion that he or she faces. So there's really no way for that champion to avoid that guy because he or she was the former champion of that division. So now that title commission will order you to face him. And yes, I understand there's still mandatories that still need to be favored for title defenses. Yeah, work that out with you know organizations or promoters to make sure that's made set and clear or set in stone to make sure that whoever's next up in line to face the champ or face with the new champion, that could be said and done pretty easy. Also, let's have fighting organizations. Fighting organizations would be very good in boxing. I think that would make the sport a lot more interesting because, having promoters running the show in boxing is pretty boring and it doesn't really make fights get made easier. It actually makes fights, it actually makes fights a lot harder where fights are not made to the point where, like let's just say a guy like Bob Arum, he doesn't want to make a fight like Manny Pacquiao versus Terrence Crawford because he thinks that there's way too much money involved for the fight. But if you could have it in a sense where you could have multiple fighting organizations that compete at the highest level with fighters that not just fight in a league per se. They still are their own independent fighter, but those fight leagues can have their own network to say, "Hey, welcome to Fight World, Fighting League." And these are their fighters that are voluntarily signed onto the network to fight those other fighters. And that's kind of like what PBC is doing, where PBC they have fighters, but it's obviously all televised. But it's almost like a Mortal Kombat type roster league that they have with all these fighters that fight under PBC with Al Heyman. Even though Al Heyman he is a promoter, and I'm not saying that you just kind of like you just kind of just take promoters away from boxing. Promoters are still in the game of boxing, but these promoters can also work with fighting organization leagues to run multiple, style round robin matches where if you want to move up and climb to become a multiple time champion, then you can either sign with a league or you could just simply be with a promoter. And then could either call your own shots to face, the toughest comp available to get up in the rankings higher because obviously I understand that there's going to be those type of fighters that just want to pad their stats and make themselves look good. Like, oh yeah, look at Canelo Alvarez. He got he got 53 wins and 1 loss coming by Floyd Mayweather, but he's still technically pound for pound, blah blah blah. And you got those like Lomachenko hype jobs where they have like 10 to 15 fights and they lost their second fight, but then they somehow magically get a title shot in their third fight. No, all that shit needs to go. Matchmaking needs to be automatically okay. If you want to keep your spot, you have to fight tougher opposition. Every fight is going to get difficult, and there should be no runaways in boxing. No fighters ducking other fighters. It should be straight up. You fight the best if you want to keep your rank, or else, guess what? You're not going to be recognized by other title commissions, and you're going to lose stock in your rank. So in order for you to keep your name in the mix as you keep climbing, you have to fight top guys, and that's what boxing needs. So I think that if you have like a pro-am type fight network leagues, like these aren't actual league teams that you get into and you sign like a contract where you're with these leagues. They're actually just fight league networks where, similar to a DAZN, or I guess like, think of it like World Combat League but without a team. You have fight league networks similar to PBC in a way where these fighters can be on a network similar to Street Beast on YouTube or something where they're always on TV. So there's no way for fighters to be, shunned out by any media where they need like a spotlight to show themselves of who they are. And those fight league networks can actually promote that fighter a lot quicker to make themselves more notable. Like to make themselves more notable in in boxing conversations in the media. So I think that definitely needs to be there because that is kind of like what the NBA does with the G League, as you see that guys that are on the come up, they're dropping like what 20 to 35 points a game. Yeah, only certain guys, but I'm just putting that out there. That is what's making those people talk about those guys. Jonathan Simmons, he's a good example of that. He came into the NBA league, to the NBA through the G League. He played with I think like with the Orlando Magic, or some G League team that was in subnet of the Orlando Magic or something like that. But then eventually, he got hit up by the San Antonio Spurs. They called him up, and I think they put him on on a 10-day or something like that. But he actually did very well, and sooner than later he got his opportunity to get a actual contract with the San Antonio Spurs for like a year or something. And now look at where he's at now. I think he plays for the Orlando Magic, but that's just a good example of what fighters can do. If fighters can get with any of these competing fighting firms or fighting league network firms, where they actually have fighters that they select to be on their network, and it's like a league in a way where these fighters can fight each other to build up their rank and to build up their name, then that will attract all the other bigger networks that can take those fighters and put them into like a ultra elite fighter, you know, tournament style bracket in a way where these fighters are kind of ranked in their network to show who is pound for pound number one, blah blah blah, and how this fighter has dealt well on the network, and it would actually attract more people to fights to see these guys fight because they're getting more media exposure by fighting upper echelon opponents every time they step into the ring, i.e., men and women. So I think that definitely needs to be innovated so that way there's more media attraction for fans to see fighters fight good opposition. See, now the last thing I want to put out is that boxing needs to have like super tournaments. Super tournaments, as far as I put it, basically have a Super Bowl every single week, every single month. It doesn't matter. You could have Super 25, you could have Super 6, you could have Rumble in the Jungle, championship tournaments. Basically, I just want to see fireworks every single weekend. Similar to like what you see or what you saw in like the World Boxing Super Series, should be similar to like Mortal Kombat or Tekken, where you have like the King of the Iron Fist tournament every single year. But I'm saying this in a more consistent fashion. So if Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, Manny Pacquiao, all these top guys that are champions at 147 want to unify their titles, they can voluntarily, come together and fight in a Super 6 or Super 4 tournament. And this tournament would be, a ultimate tournament that that could be set up in many different ways. This is just like a little idea that I came up to mind, and other people have, to have fighters fight each other at the highest level. Whether if it's a non-championship or a championship style tournament. But what these fighters can do is that these tournaments can be voluntarily agreed upon, where top contender fighters can fight it out to fight for their ranks at a higher level. Kind of similar to college basketball, but at a higher level for March Madness. Basically, just be March Madness for boxing. Every weekend. But every fight would basically be a tough fight for every fighter. And if you lose that fight, or the fighter wins that fight, then the fighter obviously loses at the tournament and loses at their ranking, but also the other fighter, gains higher, ranking status. And if, like whatever fighter that wins that tournament can either win the belt or, have a opportunity to get to a contention level status to get closer to the championship. Which that would obviously increase their stock, because that actually makes it um, a lot more fun to see the top guys go at it to prove their worth in the division that they fight for. So, like for example, like if the top 25 guys want to go at it to fight for the title, minus from like the mandatory that has to fight like the champion, that's going from 2 to 26. Um, what can be done, or like from number 2 to hold on, 27. Sorry, 27. But those guys from that starting point to the end can go at it in a huge tournament, and whoever wins out of that tournament can basically be a mandatory. Yeah, can basically be a mandatory for a ranking spot for the championship belt. Or, like even if you do lose, like your rank will be affected in a certain way depending on how far you went. But if you win like the whole thing, then that should be like an automatic like mandatory placement for a title shot. But I mean, depending on how far you go into like the tournament, that will affect like your ranking. Maybe like at least 2 3 spots down at the most. But I think that would be a good idea to have, because you could have like championship level tournaments or non-title championship, non-title, tournament setups, Super Six or Super 8 tournament where top 10 guys go at it, or like whatever, man. Like that would be awesome. Having tournaments every single month in boxing, that would attract so many people to the sport, and there would just be there'd just be so many fireworks, male and female. It'd just be crazy, man. And that would get a lot more people into boxing, because more people would start attending fights, and it would get promotions up. It would get sponsors in. It would definitely get fight networks to be made a lot quicker, or even fight leagues where they're technically networks, but they're just in a league where they have like a huge pool of fighters for whatever network that they fight under, and they kind of fight in like a league style round robin where those guys go at it and then they showcase up their talents. Or they can just bring fighters from other networks to fight each other, even though that we want to see that when it comes to like Top Rank or PBC guys. But I'm saying like in a pure market competition, having like top guys come from like what network to fight a guy from like another network, or like whatever country that they live in, that would be awesome. So that's pretty much what I have to say of how to clean up the sport of boxing. I hope this is a good video for me to um, touch base on everything of what I wanted to say. But if you guys have more ideas of what needs to be done to fix the sport of boxing, please comment down below. If you hate my damn video, then get the hell out of my channel, or just, throw a dislike. I don't care. But I just wanted to touch base on this. Please let me know what you guys thought about this video. Like, hate, comment, or subscribe. It doesn't matter. I don't care. But much love to all my support, to all my supporters. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and this is K-Rod signing out, and long live boxing. See ya. Bye.